All right, the immortal John Hancock here, and today I'm here with my good friend Brett Weiss, and I am having him on this video for a particular reason because I think he has a unique experience. He did not grow up with the Nintendo Entertainment System. He actually was in his 20s when it came out, and today's
An old
topic
man.
and today's topic is how the NES changed everything in the gaming industry and the impact that the Nintendo had when it came out. And we're here to talk about that. And so, Brett, it's a pleasure having you on. And so, why don't you share your experience? Because I think a lot of people grew up with the Nintendo Entertainment System, but fewer, I think, were in their 20s when it came out. So, why don't you share
The dying breed. Well, John, thank you so much for having me on. It's an honor. I appreciate it. So yeah, I was 20 years old, and I had been playing the Atari, ColecoVision, and television. I had all those systems hooked up to my TV, all that stuff. I grew up in the arcades, all that kind of stuff. I was 20 when my brother got me an NES for Christmas. I could not believe it because that's a parent level gift. My older brother got me an NES, and I was floored. I was excited to get it, but I don't know if I would have gotten one anytime soon if he hadn't, because I was still having a blast on Atari and ColecoVision and everything. But the second I started playing it, I could not believe what I was seeing. Super Mario Brothers. That was the first time I had played Super Mario Brothers. I never saw it in the arcades. I didn't go to my friend's house to play it because by this time I was 20. When I was hanging out with my friends, we were going to restaurants and bars and stuff. We weren't going over to each other's houses to play video games anymore. And so the first time I ever played an NES was in 1987 Christmas at my house. And I could not believe what I was seeing. Super Mario Brothers blew anything out of the water that had come before. The expansive world, the graphics, the secrets, the surprises. The controller was amazing.
Just scrolling screen, like to me, that blew me away.
They say Pitfall was the first side-scrolling platformer, Smurf rescuing Gargamel's Castle. Those games didn't truly scroll. You know, you just got screen to screen. But Super Mario Brothers was fully scrolling. So huge, and within 2 or 3 days I beat it because I played it so much and enjoyed it so much.
I have a similar experience, but a little bit different. And so I too experienced the Nintendo Entertainment System in '87. Now, I was in middle school when that came out, and for me, I experienced Super Mario Brothers first at the arcades. And so but it wasn't at an arcade, it was at a grocery store. I saw this line of people going out my local grocery store, and I was just like, what's this, and I didn't understand why there was a line of people going out my grocery store. And then I walk up and I see people are waiting to play an arcade game. There's only one arcade game at this grocery store, and it was Super Mario Brothers. And people were just saying, oh man, this is blowing all the graphics away. This is like the next thing. And then later on, because I lived in the sticks, I didn't, I wasn't reading about it. I didn't hear about it on TV. I heard about it word of mouth about the Nintendo Entertainment System. And then later on, my dad rented a Nintendo Entertainment System. And then down the road, we eventually got one in our homes in '87 sometime. I don't know when. But, that was my experience with the Nintendo Entertainment System. My dad came home with a rental case and had 2 games. One game that I remember was Castlevania. And that game blew my mind. I mean, graphics and sound. And I just really, really appreciated and was just blown away from everything. The sounds, the gameplay. I mean, the controller to me is really what separated Nintendo from previous consoles. Adding that additional button and the control pad, which they took from the Game & Watch series, just really enhanced gameplay.
Well, the controller was the first video game console controller that didn't have a major problem. The Atari 2600 joystick, while we're nostalgic for it, it was a little stiff. The 5200 one was loosey-goosey, non-centering. The ColecoVision one, a lot of people don't like that stub. The disc cramp on the television was kind of weird.
The Coleco cramp is what I call it.
The Coleco cramp, yes. Well, the NES controller was the first one. Now, they would improve it with the Super Nintendo with the rounded corners and the shoulder buttons and everything, but the NES controller was just awesome when it came out. And it gave you full control over your character like no system before. Absolutely great system with a fantastic controller. And just NES just shat. I mean, I played Castlevania. I was a big horror fan, and when Castlevania came out, in '88 is when I got a ton of games because I got it for Christmas of '87, obviously. But I got Rygar and Kid Icarus and Trojan and all these great, expansive, mind-blowing adventure / action games that were just so much fun. Contra was probably my favorite. Got it quickly after it came out, and I actually beat it within just a few days without a Konami code because I didn't even know what that was back then because there were no after the video game crash of 1983, the magazine market crashed with it. So the first few years of the NES, you could not read reviews for the NES by and large. There was a little bit here and there, like there was a newsletter and stuff. But as far as going into 7-Eleven or the grocery store and having a magazine rack where you could read reviews of Nintendo games did not exist. So you had to rely on box art and all that kind of stuff. And I could not believe how great Contra was.
Some of my very first few games that I remember, Castlevania was probably one of the very first games I played on the NES. But ice hockey, Nintendo's ice hockey was just a fantastic. To me, it was like, taking the fun of like a Pong game and just making it animated and just like what a wonderful sports game. I played that over and over again. Got that on clearance for I think less than $20 because there was a bunch of copies and there was I think a damaged box, and that was the one that my family got because it was on discount.
Sure. So, I spent Double Dribble was that way for me. I played the heck out of Double Dribble. It's a phenomenal game, and I couldn't believe the close-up dunks and all that stuff. Just so much fun. My cousin came over and played it one time, and we got so involved in it, he left his girlfriend in the living room with my parents, and she was not pleased because we were back there playing Double Dribble. But, the time got away from you. Back then, when I was 20, when I got my NES, in the first, my early 20s, I wasn't married yet, didn't have a family yet. I could spend a ton of time playing NES games, and I didn't have, this insane video game collection. So I had, limited amount of games, and you could spend a ton of time with all the games, and you kind of had to. It's what you had was what you had. You didn't have several thousand games in your collection. You just so you played the dead. I remember the first few years of the NES, I played the heck out of those games.
I think the other thing that mattered back then too is that, people don't realize that, rental stores were up and coming with VHS just about the same time as the success of the Nintendo Entertainment System. And so many people experienced different games, not by there wasn't shopping online, magazines like you were talking about the first few years weren't around. And so a lot of people would go to their local rental stores and VHS shops that offered games on the side initially. Some of them, offered a wide variety of games. I was in the rural area, so, my game selection was fairly small. We had 2 main rental stores. So I remember going in and they'd have these little chips that you would take off the rack and then take up there, and that was the game that you rented. But yeah, I mean, back then we had such limited selections of games, and so whether you rented a game or purchased a game, you played that game, good, bad, or other, until you beat it.
And the rental market before the NES really wasn't a thing with video games, and I remember when. I had a movie membership in the really early days of movie rentals. You had to pay for your rental card. Like you might pay $30 before you ever rented a movie, you had to pay for the card. And so I was already renting movies. And I remember when video games showed up, when those NES titles, I was like, wow, this is amazing. I don't have to go in and spend $30 to $50 blindly on a game. I can rent one for $3 or $4 and just kind of try it out. And there was these movie titles I thought were going to be amazing, like Predator and all these different titles. And not so much. I'm glad I rented them first.
Yeah, there were some good movie titles, but for the most part on the NES library, there were several that weren't so great.
And there were so many of them were convoluted because they really tried to be adventure games, non-linear. But they got so confused, especially if you rented them, you didn't have the manual because of Nintendo's, going after stores. And so you might have a little card or a typewritten card or some sticker on the game. Yeah. That didn't tell you enough about the adventure games and the, role-playing games. It just didn't give you enough information.
And some of those games too had like secrets in them that were hard to figure out. And so it wasn't until the release of magazines, Nintendo Power, talking about, these tricks, these intricate things that the games had. What I really liked about the Nintendo games is the animated characters. Like, Nintendo took the arcade experience and really transformed gaming from a single screen experience to something entirely different. And while I think there's some purists out there that would say that some of their arcade conversions weren't great or 100%, games such as like The Legend of Zelda was a totally different experience. And so I think Nintendo transformed the gaming market because it took that, that high score single, focal point of playing a game and expanded it to so many other possibilities, good, bad, and otherwise. But,
Right.
The library was huge. Everybody started making the games for Nintendo because it was popular. And, for me, it was so iconic. One of the first games I bought with my own money was Solomon's Key. I didn't know it was an arcade game, but it was a great adaptation of the arcade experience. Tecmo Super Bowl, Tecmo Bowl being another arcade game, but Tecmo Super Bowl was just expanded upon that. And, I played that countless hours. I remember very vividly going and meeting with my buddy at a bus stop and coming back to my house, playing that game before we went to school. And a couple times we almost missed the bus because we were playing it so much.
Yeah, in junior high, I was definitely late to school more than once from playing arcade games at a nearby convenience store.
Yeah.
So
other
but
gaming
but
experiences.
Yes, how it changed everything.
Yep.
You had these story-driven games, these games with cutscenes and text storylines and
Ninja Gaiden.
Yep,
and Ninja Gaiden was a great example.
Transferred from the living room, the public space, back to your bedroom, and a lot of people started keeping their game systems in the bedroom, and in their own rooms because you had personal experiences, almost like reading a novel or something compared to playing Space Invaders. And so it changed everything. The NES changed the market. It was so much more mainstream. The 2600 was pretty mainstream, especially after Space Invaders came out in 1980. But man, the NES brought it to a whole nother level in terms of just the public discourse and just the ubiquitous nature of it, the iconic nature of the console, just changed everything.
Yeah, I think the thing that I look back and remember about Nintendo was it took a basic gameplay element and enhanced it with the sprites and animation and sound. I think you were able to take gaming to the next level. And even looking back at several indie titles released on Steam and even app games and Switch, like there's a lot of games that take homage to the Nintendo. We were talking earlier about Shovel Knight as a good example.
Oh, yeah.
Shovel
Great
Knight,
example.
Sydney Hunter and the Curse of the Mayan is another example of a Sydney Hunter series by Collector Vision. John Lester, a good friend of ours. Yeah. And so taking that look of an 8-bit game is still around today because the Nintendo look is so iconic. When you see a Nintendo game, it has that look that really just that console, it identifies that console with that 8-bit sound and an 8-bit look. And there's several indie titles that have came out since then to honor that Nintendo look and gameplay and fantastic games. And so, I mean, it blows my mind what people are still creating now. And it's just fantastic to see it has its own life still. And so many people grew up with Nintendo, or such as yourself, you're a young adult when it came out, and it had a lasting impact. And so I really appreciate you being on here and having this discussion about how the NES impacted the industry. Brett, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me at brettweisswords.com. You can find links to my books, my YouTube channel, and all that stuff. And if you just go straight to YouTube, just put in my name, Brett Weiss. And I talk about Tales from a Retro Gamer is my sort of what the reason I got into YouTube was to tell stories. I thought, what can I do with YouTube that's different than anyone else? So I talk about discovering Pong in 1975. I talk about, how weird it was that you could actually play games in your house before, when I discovered that phenomenon. So retro gaming stories. If you like the old games and old guys, then maybe you could check out my channel.
All right. Well, it's a pleasure having you on, Brett. And
yeah, it's been fun.
And for new people visiting my channel, please hit that like and subscribe button and click the bell as I upload videos every week. You folks are wonderful and beautiful. This is the immortal John Hancock, and you take care.